I'm back. Still doing my uh, 13 days of Halloween. This is day 8. So I've been doing it now for 8 straight days, which is good. I've had some decent people checking me out, so I appreciate that. Got a new subscriber, which I appreciate. Thank you also. So here we are with day 8. This one could be a little fun, but let me just forewarn you a little bit. I'm not a big horror fan. And honestly, I haven't really seen a lot of the horror movies that these slashers are in. But I but I do know about them, and this is more along the lines of I haven't actually physically seen all their movies and stuff like that because there's so many of them, but I know their general what they do, and what this list is about is kind of not really a critique of their movies, is more of why they make a decent slasher, or why they're on the list for being, just someone that kills somebody. So pretty just generic stuff, but I'm just trying to do something a little different. So we'll see how it works out. But I have the top 20 best slashers, and I've got 2 on here as my honorable mention that I'm not sure maybe classify as sort of a slasher sort of person, but we can try it, and they're honorable mentions, so it doesn't matter. But again, this is my list. It is not set in stone. It is a fluid list. It could change within a year or so, whatever. This is my opinion of stuff. So if your stuff doesn't match, if your opinion doesn't match up with mine, that's okay, because it's my opinion and you have your own opinion. And if you want to comment on it, you can, but also be aware that, saying that I'm wrong and you're right is not good, because it's opinion. And if you want to really make it something, you can make a video about your top ones if you want to. But these are my top ones, and I'm going to try to get them going out here a little bit. And I'm talking about why they're so high and a bunch of different things, just what they do, down the amount of sort of movies they make and stuff like that. So my honorable mention, as I said, I'm not sure if you can classify them kind of as slasher killers, but I figure I put them on here because they are fairly famous. Hellraiser is first up. Hellraiser is more of a S&M, gory S&M, violent sort of thing. A Cenobite, which is there's a mysterious box, and if you play it, this demon sort of appears and tortures you and all kinds of stuff. So I guess it's not technically a slasher since they're not hunting you down, but I'd like to throw they are a fairly popular character and have been in a number of movies. But it's not really a slasher, but that's why it's an honorable mention. So that's just one of my looks at it. And the other one is Leprechaun, because I like the Leprechaun movies. I think they're cheesy goodness. And unlike other, well, no, that's true. Most slashers have a method to why they're going after their victims. Leprechaun definitely has a reason, because they steal his gold, or they get mixed up with his stuff, and he has to get revenge on stuff. But Leprechaun is another honorable mention on here that I find it interesting. I haven't seen these, but I've seen the trailers for it, and I can get the general idea of what they're about. But I can't, for the life of me, support these, because it just seems stupid, because it seems like the cool thing to do when copyright laws drop for certain fictional characters, and they use them in ways that they're not supposed to, is not cool. It's it might be interesting, but why would you do that? And then you just keep doing it. In this case, it's the Winnie the Pooh killer and the Steamboat Willie killer movies that are out there, since both of them are Disney-esque characters. Though, to be fair, the Winnie the Pooh copyright loss is not the one for Disney. It is L.L. Milne's, or A.A. Milne, excuse me, character. So they're using that, whereas Steamboat Willie is the first technically Mickey Mouse cartoon. So they have made 2 Winnie the Pooh movies, where someone dressed up like a Winnie the Pooh and Eeyores and stuff like that go around and killing people, and that's just is just bad and wrong in all cases. And then the Steamboat Willie one is a new one that just sort of came out, where it's someone who's dressed up as in a mouse costume in black and white, killing people. It's I find it just it's I get it, but it's kids cartoons, and if you're trying to stick it to Disney or whatever, to have a kid cartoon go around killing people, I guess that's your jam, and it seems to be a popular thing because you've got a Bambi killer movie coming out. You've got the Seven Dwarfs being psychotic killers is coming out also. So it just isn't. I don't know, but they're number 20 just because of, I guess, their current. They are using popular characters in a different way than they're not supposed to be used for, but they're kids' characters, man. You just really got to stop it. Number 19 is the Prom Night Killer. After the success of Halloween, and that embarked and I think maybe even Friday the 13th came out before Prom Night. It ushered in the era of the slasher, and the Prom Night Killer is nothing too spectacular. Doesn't really have any other gimmicks and stuff like that. Just sort of is kind of there, killing people, and just, Jamie Lee Curtis is in it again, so you get kind of a a feel for that. Just double check, because it's been forever since I saw it. 1980, so it was before Friday the 13th, actually. And Leslie Nielsen was also who are targeted at the prom by a mass killer, so eventually the accidental death of a young girl 6 years earlier. So marrying a ski mask. So nothing too extraordinary. There you go. So Prom Night Killer is number 19. I will have more to talk about down the line. Number 18 is the Valentine Killer. Now, here's a weird thing about the Valentine Killer. Again, holidays tend to be the interesting time to create this, with Halloween being Halloween and then Friday the 13th being Friday the 13th. So now you're trying to find a horror thing for every holiday, and you're doing pretty good at it. You've got the Valentine one. You've got a Thanksgiving one, which we'll talk about a little bit. You've got Christmas ones, till Halloween. You could make a case that I Know What You Did Last Summer, Fisherman, could be a July 4th one, since the murders take place on like a July 4th weekend, even though he's not like wearing patriotic garb. But it's a great idea to have a holiday killer around and tie it to the holiday like Halloween did, to make it fairly interesting. The Valentine Killer, again, okay, nothing really outlandish or crazy. That's why it's number 18, number 18. But what's interesting is that, and I can't remember, and I didn't see this one, but Eli Roth did an Oculus horror movie, which has a Valentine edge to it also, which actually looks a whole lot better than the original Valentine one that we just talked about. And I think I'm going to put that here also, even though I can't think of the name of it, because I saw the trailer for it over and over again. I was like, it's pretty decent. It was a scary looking kind of cherub mask with a bow and arrow sort of thing, and it really kind of encapsulates what the holiday is about. This was just someone killing people because they were rejected, sort of thing. So number 18 was Valentine. So number 17 is the aforementioned Thanksgiving Killer and the aforementioned Eli Roth. This started off as a joke, as a gag. Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez did the Grindhouse movie, where they each made a 1 hour long movie in the old Grindhouse style, which is lots of gratuitous sex and violence, and just shown just to be bad dust on the film reel, and just sort of weird cuts and stuff like that. And then there were always attractions for other Grindhouse stuff that were coming in the future. So they got some of their buddies together to make sort of mini trailers for movies that were supposed to come out later in the Grindhouse format. It's like, coming soon to a theater near you. And then you see a trailer for this. And then you see a trailer for Thanksgiving. Eli Roth was, of course, making a joke about the Halloween thing, and says, basically was saying you could really put a killer in any situation, in any holiday, and make it work for the most part if you make it unique. And Thanksgiving is definitely unique, but it started off as just a laugh, as a joke. And a lot of people said it was one of the best parts of Grindhouse. And then Eli Roth started thinking a little bit more, and he said, yeah, I think I can expand on it. And what he did was he didn't really keep anything from the Grindhouse trailer. He decided to change it up a little bit, and came up with in my opinion, it was trailer that was made for Grindhouse was supposed to be a Grindhouse trailer. So it is kind of goofy and dumb and stuff like that. But Eli wanted to do a more classic horror film, and not a Grindhouse, I should say slasher film, and not a Grindhouse film. So he went back to the drawing board and took the general idea he had for Thanksgiving and expanded it into this movie, where he had the killer be dressed as an old colonial pilgrim, whatever. And in Eli Roth fashion, the killings are a little bit more grotesque, I guess is the proper word for it, than you expect from normal ones. And just the connotations with Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving is one of those holidays that it's American holiday. They have it in Canada, yes, but the movie is set in the United States and set on the United States on Thanksgiving, and uses the United States version of Thanksgiving as the main story point. And Thanksgiving in America doesn't really have a lot of movies or TV shows based upon it. It has some, but not a lot, because it's sort of that middle child between Halloween and Christmas. And Christmas has gotten bold recently that as soon as November 1st hits, Christmas is everywhere. And that used to not be the case. It used to be the case was they wait till after Thanksgiving to do the Christmas stuff. But because money was wasting, they decided, hey, let's up the ante a little bit and do it during Thanksgiving, or before Thanksgiving and right after Halloween, since Thanksgiving is like a nothing holiday. But Thanksgiving to me is one of the best ones. And I don't know if I'd necessarily watch this movie on Thanksgiving like I do a Halloween, because I'm not into the grotesque sort of horror stuff, but it intrigued me enough that I wanted to check it out. And I probably won't watch it again, but I just wanted to say I had a chance to do it. Number 16. I do have, there it is. Yeah, I was like, where's the 16? Is continuing the the holiday thing. I went from Valentine's Day to Thanksgiving to Christmas. We have the Silent Night, Deadly Night Santa slasher. Again, having something associated with joy and for children, and to perverting it into a psychopathic killer like they did with Winnie the Pooh and Steamboat Willie, is kind of frustrating. But I also have to remember that a lot of the video games that have come out now, like Inky, not Inky, Bendy, the Ink Machine Monster, is in the style of an old 1940s sort of cartoon, and he's like a demonic sort of thing about that. And there was one I just had in my head, but I lost it. It was also, like Five Nights at Freddy's also, which is supposed to be, childlike wonder about animatronic animals that people love to watch. They sing and dance while they're eating cheap pizza. And then FNAF decided they were going to turn it into a horrifying horror experience. But those are video games, and they've made movies, FNAF at least. So Bendy hasn't really had anything yet. But that's kind of what they're doing with Silent Night, Deadly Night here is turning Santa into a slasher. Now, also to be fair, one of the first because I've always wanted to be like a movie maker, a filmmaker, director, whatever, and a writer and stuff like that. And one of the first ideas I ever had was a trilogy called Insanity Claus. It was Insanity Claus, Bride of Insanity Claus, and Insanity Claus versus Sleazy Claus. That's my trilogy, and I have the story mapped out. I just need to write it. And it's it was an idea I've had since the 90s. And again, it's an insane Santa Claus going around killing people. And so you can call me hypocritical if you want, me saying all this stuff about it's kind of off that they're taking something that's beloved by children and families and perverting it into a horror slasher killer sort of thing, because I did the same thing. But still, seeing a dude in a Santa Claus suit going around and axing people is still a little off to me. My killings were going to be a little bit more classy and funny, or they might have been like the axe. As I said, I had the ideas down. I didn't actually write anything down, so I couldn't tell you. But again, it just goes to show you that you can throw, much like with Shakespeare, you can throw a slasher killer really into any point in history, in holidays, stuff like that. And you're going to see a few more. I mean, if you keep looking at the list, there's a whole lot more that are similar to that as well. But Silent Night, Deadly Night, Santa Slasher is number 16. Again, here we go. Here's another one. Number 15 is the Happy Death Day slasher, which was made of 2 movies out of that. And this one is more recent. It's a 21st century slasher. And it's a high concept idea from Blumhouse, which is actually kind of interesting. And actually, I'm intrigued about checking it out again. Particularly that's discussing possibly a third one. But the first one generally takes the idea of Groundhog Day, which is someone relives the day over and over again, and only they know they're reliving the day over and over again. And then Blumhouse likes to change stuff like that. They did that with Happy Death Day. They did another thing with Freaky, where they did the Freaky Friday body switch thing, an adult and a teenager, but instead the teenager switched into the body of a serial killer and the serial killer switched to the body of a teenage girl. So they have these general high concept ideas that are actually kind of decent. And Happy Death Day is actually a decent duet of films. Again, general premise of the Groundhog Day, but this time it's a killer out there, and it takes place on the main character's birthday. And she wakes up and ends up getting killed that night. And then once she gets killed, everything resets again. So she doesn't know. So, and here's where the rub is. This is where the movie makes it interesting. It's such a great idea. So she learns that she's reliving. She wakes up on a regular day and she lives her life, regular stuff like that. And then she dies. But then when she wakes up after dying, she's kind of relieved not to be dead. But then she realizes she's reliving the day again. And so she wants to avoid dying. But because she tries to avoid doing the stuff that led her to get killed, her friends ended up starting getting killed, and other people started up getting killed, and more slaughter happened, and she felt guilty about that. So she ended up knowing that she's going to have to restart the day again. So in order to do that, she's got to die. So she dies again and restarts again, and then she's got to keep trying to figure it out so that they can stop the killer before. Before any of her friends get killed, and if none of her friends get killed and she doesn't get killed, then perhaps they can break the loop and move on. But there's a nice little twist to it, which what was killing her was not exactly what she thought it was. So that's a whole nother thing. And then the sequel sort of upped the ante a little bit and started turning it more into sort of a multiverse, multiple person sort of event. But the same serial killer with like the baby face mask was come back out again, which is kind of a freaky mask when you think about it. The baby face mask and stuff like that coming after you and stuff like that. But Happy Death Day 1 and 2 are both decent slasher films. And Blumhouse, as I said, I have nothing but total respect for Blumhouse. And I mentioned over and over again why I do, because they know that, you know, they can make some good money on a film, but they also need to recoup their money. So they make these small, low budget films, $5 million, $10 million, that have some of these high concepts, or could just be, you know, typical like remake of Fantasy Island or something like that. And then they release it in the theaters and it might only make like 20, 25 million over the span of its 2 or 3 weeks of runtime. So let's just say it makes you made a mill for $10 million and it makes like $30 million. You just made $20 million profit. So even though it didn't have a $100 million opening or anything like that, you still made $20 million. So then you take that $20 million and you start maybe spreading it around into more high concept stuff like a FNAF or something like that. Or you take that and just put that into the next cheap movie and keep building up and make it successful. So I got to give Blumhouse credit. And Happy Death Day is actually a surprisingly well done slasher series with again, kind of nothing too special about the slasher, but the mask is kind of creepy. That's number 15. Number 14, we have the Cherry Falls Killer, which now we again are starting to get now into the more concept sort of slashers. And a lot of people might not know about the Cherry Falls horror film, slasher film, but everyone knows the tropes, particularly from Scream, where Randy is telling them what the 3 rules of surviving a horror movie are. And one of them is don't have sex. Sex equals death, that sort of thing. Because in all the movies you've seen, in Halloween and a Friday the 13th and stuff like that, when a couple's having sex, they end up getting massacred eventually. I don't know, as a punishment for having sex before marriage type of thing. Is it trying to make a statement, or is it just a way that they can slip in titties and ass and really increase stuff like that? But Cherry Falls decides that they're going to flip the script a little bit. So as it were, you all know that you have sex, or if you are not a virgin, the virgin is usually the last girl surviving. If you've had sex or you're having sex, you're going to die during a slasher film, which is, again, one of the rules in Scream. So Cherry Falls decides they're going to flip the script a little bit, and it is ingenious. The serial killer is now targeting virgins instead of people who are promiscuous, which in turn causes the funniest things of the movie is causes the parents of their teenage kids who they've been telling don't have sex to go and have sex now so they don't die by the serial killer. It's such a great idea. And unfortunately, the film doesn't quite live up to the story idea, but at least it's a genuinely interesting idea. And that's what makes sometimes horror effective, is when you flip the script. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit here in a second about another film. And when you flip the script a little bit, and, you know, same thing, you could even make the case for Happy Death Day, where the killings happen over and over again. But spoiler alert, the killer is not necessarily the serial slasher who's been killing people. That's the thing that is flipping the script again, which kind of makes it interesting. So the Cherry Falls, if you got a chance, it's not a great movie, but the premise itself is actually brilliant. Same with this one. Number 13 is another premise that was brilliant, that didn't quite hit for me story-wise. Now, Cherry Falls and this next one, number 13, is Urban Legend, the Urban Legends Killer. These came out during that wonderful period in 1997 through 1999, 2000, maybe 2001 if you want to make the case for that with Scream 3 coming out. Where horror with young stars, up and coming stars of the era was one of the biggest blockbusters in film, headed up by Scream, obviously. I know what you did last summer, stuff like that. So other films decided they saw the success for that. They say you just grab a bunch of famous young actors from like a 90210 or Melrose Place or Dawson's Creek or whatever. You throw them into a horror movie that is very similar to like a Scream, where you're sort of meta, where you're sort of making a comment about the thing, but not making it like Scream sort of thing, and making the killer a little bit different and stuff like that. And also Scream was kind of the first one, it's not really the first one, but it's the one that really brought to the fore. After the early 80s, you weren't like with Prom Night, you didn't know who the killer was. But then when you get to the mid 80s with the big ones, which I'll talk about in a little bit, you knew exactly who they are, what they were, and stuff like that. And then Scream sort of brought it back, where part of the fun of the horror movie is to figure out who the killer is by using clues that you see in the film, and you can make your own cases till they reveal what happens in your head. I mean, you can't make it while you're in the movie theater, but you can, the way that Wes Craven or whoever is directing the film might be putting the attention on a certain character, and you're like, okay, they're probably the killer, and then they get killed. It's just one of those things. But urban legend, again, is another. So you couldn't ape Scream. You could ape some of the stuff about it, the meta-ness and stuff like that, but you needed to come up with your own creation. Hence, Cherry Falls flipped the script the way it did. And Urban Legends sort of does something also. Everybody has heard the urban legends. It's something you do when you were hanging out as a kid. The scare, when you're telling scary stories, stuff like that. A couple making out in a car. But there's a killer out and about, but they're not too worried about it because they're lusting after each other. But then they start hearing a weird scraping on the top of the car. They start hearing noises or whatever, and the boy goes out and disappears, and then there's a weird scraping, so the girl freaks out, and I don't actually quite know how does she run away, and then when they come back, they see the dead body of her boyfriend hanging from there, and he was scraping the top of it. Or the one about someone in the back seat. And you go to a gas station it's late at night, and you're at a gas station, and a creepy guy works at the gas station, is trying to convince you to come into the gas station with him, but he's creepy and it's at night and you're freaked out a little bit about it, but he can't, he's trying to help you, but you don't realize it. He's trying to tell you about the person in the back seat of your car, who's like a mental patient who wants to kill you, sort of thing. And these aren't killing related, but if you put Pop Rocks and Diet Coke together, your stomach's gonna explode, that sort of thing. Or regular Coke, I think was what it was. So you have all these urban legends and stuff like that. I think there's one, where a girl's at home alone or whatever, and she's hearing noises or whatever, can't find, and the killer's like underneath her bed, and there's a note on the bathroom mirror. It says, "Glad you didn't check under the bed," or something like that. So there's a lot of these sort of weird sort of urban legends, which are folklore tales that were handed down, scary tales. And so Urban Legends, the film, decides to take those urban legends, which, the whole idea of an urban legend is it's my best friend's cousin had this happen to them, and they told my cousin about it, and my cousin told me about it. And so it's sort of like one of these, as a sort of folklore story sort of thing going on. So these probably didn't happen. They're probably just made up stories. So what the urban legend killer does is they are taking the urban legends literally and doing exactly what happens in them. So killing their victims and making it like the urban legends, like someone flashing your brights. If you see a car driving with no lights on and you flash your your brights on, say, hey, turn on your lights, they turn around and start chasing you or whatever, and they're going to come find you and kill you, that sort of thing. Or it's a gang initiation thing. Again, another urban legend. So the killer sort of does that. So the killer's in a car with no headlights. They're driving up the road. Someone flashes at them. So they turn around and they wreck into the car, and then they kill the person in the car. They have the couple up at the, like that. The guy goes out and hears the noise and then doesn't come back. And then you hear the weird scraping that happens, or the weird trips or whatever, the don't look, glad you didn't look under the bed. Or there's the other one is like, she reached under the bed and it was her fingers were getting licked, so she thought the dog was under there, that sort of thing, but it was actually the killer. So all these sort of urban legend sort of things. So the killer in urban legend uses the urban legend stories to actually do the killings. So it's kind of interesting because some people have, most people probably have heard these urban legends, but there's, there's like a whole new generation now that have probably never heard these urban legends because they have their own, which are more these creepypasta stuff, like the Backrooms and Slender Man and stuff like that. But that's what sort of makes urban legends sort of look better. And again, it was the one closest to Scream because you brought in a bunch of famous young actors. Joshua Jackson's in it. Robert Englund from Nightmare on Elm Street's in it as well. And you've had a lot of, Rebecca Goodyear, something like that, who is a woman you've seen before in a million of she was on 90210, I think. She's in it as well. And then the redhead, I forget her name, from Twin Peaks, and then was in Mr. Holland's Opus. She plays the good guy and stuff like that, the last girl. And so that's kind of, urban legend is probably the closest to Scream that these horror movies came to, but it's not quite the same. But that's why it's higher up than any of the other ones. Number 12 is another one where the script has been flipped in a killer story, but not quite exactly how you think. This is a film that came out in May. And it was actually, I was touting it a little bit, and I didn't go see it, but I did read the synopsis of it, so I know what basically goes on. But just watching the trailer, you get the idea of what the movie's about. It's not that hard to be able to talk about it and not see it. It's In a Violent Nature, which is such a great premise, and it's hard to believe that it has never been done before now, because slasher films have been around since '78. I mean, Leatherface and Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't really a slasher film per se. And, some people say it was like the first one like that, or you can even go all the way back to Psycho. But again, not quite the same. Halloween and then all the stuff that happened in the 80s and stuff like that, those were the epitome of the slasher film. So then for the 2020s, they had to rejuvenate the slasher film genre, and In a Violent Nature is what you get out of it. Again, it boggles my mind that no one in the 90s, the early 2000s, the 2010s, the 80s came up with this idea. Like, it would be perfect because basically it's Jason Voorhees stalking his victims from Jason Voorhees' viewpoint. You could do that for Friday the 13th, but this isn't Jason Voorhees. In a Violent Nature is a completely different character, new character, and there is a story behind why he's killing people. And again, he's not a one of the mystery ones like the Scream killers and stuff like that. This is, a homage to the Freddy Kruegers and the Mike Myers and most especially the Jason Voorhees. And the whole film is told entirely from the perspective of the serial the slasher killer, which again is such a really good idea. I mean, you see him walking in the woods from his viewpoint, and he hears car on the highway. He's minding his own business, walking around the woods. He hears car on the highway and young kids laughing and stuff like that. She sees a woman doing yoga. He sees a couple of girls swimming in the water, and he wants to kill them. And so, like with the girls in the water, he's on the other side of the lake. They don't see him. He sees them. So from his perspective, the whole time we're watching these girls, we're not seeing it from the perspective of the girls, which you would have in normal slasher films. And then he goes into the water, and then you cut to seeing the girls, and then you see the one go underwater, and then the other one gets killed, stuff like that. And then you see how they prep to kill people, and when they actually, find somebody, how they slice and dice it from their perspective. It is very gory, particularly the death of the yoga girl is a little bit excessive, but that seems to be the key thing now, is that excessive gore and violence seems to be the big thing now. I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But In a Violent Nature is such a really good idea. And again, for fans of the slasher films who really like their gore and their horror, it's right up your alley. But from a filmmaking perspective and a storyline idea, flipping the script on the slasher film again is awesome and makes for a pretty original and interesting film. Again, I can't believe that it has never been done before. It seems like the most obvious, story is to tell a slasher film from the perspective of the slasher. I mean, think of the possibilities you could do. And it did well enough, and it's on Shudder, I think now. It did well enough. They're working on a sequel. So obviously you will, because most of these horror films and horror slasher films, they've had sequels. Even the cheap ones like the Silent Night, Deadly Nights, they've had multiple ones as well. Prom Night has had a couple of them, Thanksgiving is still fairly new, but there's talk that he wants to do another one. So there you go. So number 12 is In a Violent Nature. If you're not a big gore fan or stuff like that, just at least just check out the trailer. It is such a really intense trailer, a really good trailer, and does what a trailer's supposed to. Tells the story, but not telling the story, and then gets you intrigued enough that makes you want to say, maybe I should go see what happens in this film. Number 11, I put kind of at number 11 because of a personal thing. I have had a crush with two of the women in this movie, and I had to do it. Number 11 is I Know What You Did Last Summer. Now, it's also up here also. Again, we're not really talking about the stories and stuff like that, but we're talking about the killers. But I did also kind of focus on the story as well, because I Know What You Did Last Summer is what sort of kicked off the whole Scream thing. Kevin Williamson, hot off of Dawson's Creek, did an adaptation of this. It's based on a YA book, I think, something like that. God, as I said, Sarah Michelle Gellar and Jennifer Love Hewitt, two of the most popular female stars of that era, the late 1990s, to star in it. You get Ryan Phillippe and Freddie Prinze Jr., also two handsome dudes as well. And you turn it into a slasher film where these four friends get drunk. They're driving along the beach after graduation. They run into a dude, but it could really be bad for them because they were drunk and they could have killed this guy, and they could go to prison and their lives could be destroyed. So they decide to make a pact and decide to get rid of the body. But then they discover that the body is not quite dead, but they've already gone this far. So they just end up, dropping him in the water, and hopefully he'll drown and he'll die, and they'll find him and think he just drowned, and won't know, that we did anything about it. Our life is clear. But of course, a year later, their lives are not perfect, and they come back and they're suffering from guilt and stuff like that. And again, it's around 4th of July holiday. And then weird things start to happen with the phrase, I Know What You Did Last Summer, appearing everywhere. And, like Sarah Michelle Gellar's hair gets cut while she's sleeping. Jennifer Love Hewitt's, this is still something that to this day, I don't know how he did it. And it's one of the lapses in judgment in the film is that that the killer fills Jennifer Love Hewitt's car with crabs and like the dead body of Johnny Galecki's character, and then she opens it, and then she goes to get Ryan Phillippe or whatever, and then they're all there, and they all come out, and the back is completely clean as if nothing happened. So and there's nothing, like it couldn't drop down around the car because there's no crabs or anything like that. So how the hell did the killer do that within such a small time frame? That's the only kind of issue I have with it. But again, it's the fisherman. He's wearing, he looks like the Gordon seafood, guy, you see on the Gordon seafood, frozen seafood dinner, stuff like that, the yellow slicker with the hook and stuff like that. And that's, he's getting revenge. And again, the rumor is they're trying to figure out who it is because they think that the guy they hit is dead because they left him to drown. And so they think it's someone else fucking with them or is trying to blackmail them or something like that. And then, spoiler, it turns out to be the same guy they hit. And there's a whole story about that behind that. So again, I put it mainly in there because it had such a like a beginning point for the 1990s horror Scream that led up to Scream and stuff like that. And it has, two of my crushes in it. So that's why I have it at number 11. Number 10, we find Candyman, Tony Todd. Candyman. You see that in the mirror, and there's bees, and he's a killer. And I guess technically he's not really a serial slasher, but he's still an iconic character who does go around and kill young people, and does it with weapons and stuff like that. I'm going to turn this off because I was waiting for my Fortnite. Let me just check the shop here real quick. It's just somebody else stuff. It's not Mike Myers. Okay, there's no Mike Myers. Okay. So I should check that here. Okay. I will play you once I'm done this. So Candyman is another sort of urban legend, instead usually it's Bloody Mary, which some people say, but they decide to do it with Candyman instead. And it turns out he's like some sort of New Orleans sort of demonic spirit kind of thing that gets drawn to mirrors and comes out and kills people. So he doesn't go around and hunt people unless they call him out and stuff like that. But it's still, Candyman is, I guess what I was trying for in this list is not necessarily maybe slashers in the slasher thing, but killers that, like with a Leprechaun or stuff like that, that go around and do kill a lot of people regardless of how they get drawn out or whatever. And, when you hear slasher, you think of the big ones. And these aren't, obviously, we're pointing out that these aren't actually the case for all these as well. So Candyman's number 10. Again, here's another one. Number 9 is Pennywise the Dancing Clown from It. And doesn't fit quite the slasher persona that, you expect from, again, the big ones that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, because obviously they're in the top 5. And, but at the same time, Pennywise does share a lot in common with them. Basically, in the story, he's like a demon sort of thing that has taken this form of a clown and has to come out every 30 years to feed, and has to kill like 5 kids, 10 kids, something like that. I think it's 5 or 7 kids that have to get killed and eaten so that they can survive for the next 30 years. And they go into hibernation, and then they go into hibernation for 30 years. And then once the 30 years is up, they come back and need to get sustenance again. And so they kill another 5 or 7, whatever it is. And then you have another 30 days, 30 years of hibernation, and then back again. And that's the premise of the movie. So even though he's not, again, slasher per se, as you expect when you hear the word slasher, he still is something that comes out and uses mind tricks and stalks people. Like, he stalks people before he kills them, makes comments at them, lets them see him watching them, sort of part of the whole scary clown thing I talked about a few days ago, one of my other lists and stuff like that. Yeah, actually, it was yesterday when I was talking about supernatural and cryptids. So You could make the case that he is kind of a slasher because the kids are at random. It's whoever is within the vicinity, but Pennywise needs to kill them to have sustenance to survive their 30-year hibernation. And then, of course, everyone knows the story. There's the Losers Club, 7 kids who band together, who fight him and are able to defeat him before he's able to complete his hibernation task. But they weren't able to kill him, but they were able to send him away. And so Mike decided he had to stay and be the caretaker while everybody else went off and was successful. And 30 years on the nose, the killings start up again with, weird things connecting it to Pennywise. So Mike does what he has to do. He calls the losers back now. 30 years later, they're all grown-ups in their 40s, and they have to come back, band together, and defeat Pennywise once and for all. Harry Anderson has one of the best lines in the It miniseries where he goes, "I swear if he comes back when I'm 90 or something like that, or 80 or 70, or it was like, if he comes back when I'm 70, so God help me, or so God help him, or something like that." They know they have to finish it then and there. So you could conceivably make the case that Pennywise is a slasher and is a fairly popular because everybody knows who Pennywise is. Not only do you have the miniseries, you have the novels based on, and you have the 2 movies that were just remade about it at the early part of this, the 2020s and 2010s, stuff like that. So that's why I have it at number 9. Number 8 is Billy from Saw. Billy is just more of the face of the guy who actually creates the torture chambers. I'm not the biggest Saw fan, and so I don't really know much about Billy, but I know that because they are fairly popular movies, they're done 10, 11 of them, something like that, and he fits the mold of the slasher, even though he's not physically hunting them down. Instead, he traps people into his torture chambers, and they have to do tasks in order to survive. And if they fail them, they're going to die. So even though it's not quite your definition, again, of what you think a slasher might be, i.e. the big ones, he still conceivably could be considered one because he does kill lots of people. He is the reason for them dying because he created the devices and the plans and stuff like that were used to kill them. And he kidnaps them as well, claiming that all of them are being punished for stuff that they did, that they're not good people and that they're being punished for what they did. I hate torture stuff, so I've never seen any of the Saw movies. But I do know about the character, and I know he's a little wooden doll that is used, but the face that's on the TV all the time is the Billy mask sort of thing. So I figured because there are close to 11 movies out there, so it's considered a franchise, and it's about killing a lot of different people. Again, you're not doing the whole stalker thing that the real slashers do, but you can still consider him to be a slasher since he actually does, go out and kill people multiple times. Number 7 is a Terrifier clown, another one that I have no desire to see, but I had to mention him, had to put him at number 7 because he is the hottest character out there now. Terrifier has returned to sort of the grindhouse, gross out, gory horror films, and throw into that everyone's fear of clowns, and again, sort of seasonal stuff. I think there's like a Halloween. One of the movies takes place around Halloween. The most recent one takes place around Christmas time, but I don't think he talks. He just viciously kills people. Like I think there was one where he bisected a woman hanging upside down, which is disgusting, and all the blood and gore everywhere. But in the storyline itself, there is an actual storyline, and there's a woman who is sort of connected to him in like a spiritual way, because Terrifier is not really like a person. He's more of a spirit. It's sort of like if Pennywise didn't just stop at killing 5 children, but just went around and just was just wanted to kill people, didn't talk, didn't taunt or anything like that, just came in and just sort of sliced and diced. And I had to bring Terrifier into it because he is one of the most popular characters right now. It's an independent film that was number one at the box office last week. Terrifier 3 made $20 million. Now, they could say that the state of filmmaking at the time, there's really nothing that could compete with it. And it's around Halloween and stuff like that. That's when the horror movies make sense. But it is an independent film. It has nothing to do with any of the film companies, and it beat all the film companies' films that they had come out at that time. So there is a Terrifier movement going on, and it combines everyone's fear of like Pennywise-esque sort of clowns with vicious gore and bizarre storylines. And I had to put him up this high because he is right now an iconic character and has been for this decade for the most part. And is one of, as I said, one of the hottest things right now. So I had to put it up here now. Number 6, a lot of people might be angry with me putting him up this high, but Leatherface is number 6. Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its various reboots and stuff like that. Accordingly, based on a true story, supposedly. Don't know how true that is, but it is, again, another sort of gory, creepy sort of 1970s grindhouse sort of thing. Came out 50 years ago this year, 74 then, made it 74. And the premise is the same. Bunch of hippies in the 70s drive to this like ranch or whatever and run into this sick, bizarre, cannibalistic family and their crazy son who wields a chainsaw and kills people, and they eat the meat, and he also wears their skin all over his body. It is a disturbing, bizarre sort of creature and is considered one of the top slasher characters because he fits the mold, even though he basically stays within the confines of his home. It's everybody comes to him and he's got to protect this house and his family, and he's crazy, and chainsaws scare the living crap out of me because if a chainsaw hits you, it's going to be extraordinarily painful. And again, I've only seen the original one, and I hate these other films and just the thought of what happens in a lot of them, and cannibalism and wearing of the skin on the face. It makes my stomach ache. It makes me just go bleh. But Leatherface has to be number 6 because when it comes to these sort of killer type of things, you could make a case that Psycho back in the 60s was like the first one to really show someone crazy killing people. And then Leatherface, again, had that sort of grindhouse, sort of gritty 1970s sort of feel right around Vietnam and stuff like that. So it fit for that time frame. But it wasn't till the delicate embrace of slasher horror with Halloween, which I still consider to be the granddaddy of the slasher film and not Texas Chainsaw Massacre, despite the fact that Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out 4 years before Halloween did. But Leatherface is still always considered to be part of the big crew of slashers. As I said, it's had multiple movies made about his character, has had reboots, action figures, there's t-shirts, all kinds of stuff. And he's in Fortnite now. I just was going through the shop. He's there now. So you can play him. You can play as Leatherface in Fortnite now. So he's iconic. Also in Summer School, which is a great movie, where the stoners absolutely love the movie and are able to show it in school during their summer school. And again, it's a vicious 1970s era horror because back then, 70s horror was kind of vicious and grotesque and gory, gore-filled and stuff like that, and dark and cynical. And it needs to be on the list, number 6. Number 5, we have Chucky. Again, you have to start thinking about this. Chucky is a doll possessed by a dead killer sort of thing. And he somehow an effective killer. I mean, he's a doll only about 3 feet high, if that, maybe 3 feet high. Just has like a little knife that he uses. He, jumps on you and attacks you, but he's a toy. I don't think he becomes a human boy when he's in the form of Chucky. I think he's still a toy. And to have people have so much trouble trying to stop him and trying to kill him when it's a possessed toy for the most part, shouldn't be that hard to defeat him. But Chucky is iconic enough that they've made multiple movies about him. They had a TV show that got pretty good, decent ratings that unfortunately got canceled by Sci-Fi. They upped the ante a little bit and went a little off the rails when they made him fall in love with a woman and then turn her into a doll sort of thing also. It's a bizarre series of films about, again, as I said, a possessed doll that goes around and killing people. And that makes me think is that it should be so they should be the least threatening slashers, but somehow they are on par with the big guys. And in the end, you could also make the case that he spawned off the Annabeths and the Megans and all these other horror films where dolls or toys are possessed, come to life, and kill people. And again, they're dolls and toys. How can they kill you? They're dolls and toys. You should easily be very easily to destroy them. But I guess that's what makes the horror so effective. But because Chucky is so insanely popular, and not just with specific people at work, I've got like 2 or 3 people right off the bat that I know of who are huge Chucky fans, and all of them are different. And there's actual Chucky dolls you can get now. My friend Kim, who's obsessed with Chucky, she has a Chucky doll. It's in her back seat, all the time. And it boggles my mind that a possessed doll can become so horrific and killery, and successful at killing people when it should be a breeze to kill them, and they're not really that scary, to be honest. But that's just me. And Chucky is iconic. He's got the TV show. He had the TV show, and lots of movies, a reboot, and then just lots of general pop culture stuff. People know who Chucky is also. They even nicknamed Gruden, John Gruden, at one time an NFL National Football League coach, because he's got red hair and sort of freckles and makes faces like Chucky, so they always called him Chucky. So Chucky is iconic, and that's why he deserves to be at number 5. Number 4 is, as I talked about just briefly when I talked about Leatherface, is the granddaddy of the mass slasher films. It's Michael Myers and Halloween. When this movie came out, nothing like it really had ever been seen before. Obviously, 4 years previous, Leatherface had been seen with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it was not quite the same thing. It was not quite the same sort of style, sort of like that. It was completely different. This Halloween movie and this slasher was something no one ever really heard of before. We know who he is. Michael Myers is his name. We know what his history is. He killed his sister when he was like 6 years old or 8 years old or 10 years old or something like that. And then his parents came home and found him with the bloody knife and his sister dead upstairs by stab wounds. Got sent to a psychiatric hospital where he spent like 11 years there, half of which he was on the tutelage, or rather the watch of a doctor named Loomis, who tried about 4 or 5 years to try to reach him, but then realized that there's nothing but pure evil there, and spent the last 4 or 5 years trying to make sure he never escapes again. And he escapes. And he heads right back to Haddonfield, and no one really explains why he picks these three specific girls, babysitters, to continue his killing. Now, in the sequel, Halloween 2, there is a case sort of made that we've learned that Jamie Lee Curtis's character was apparently the sister of Mike Myers's of Mike Myers. But after he killed his older sister, the parents didn't want him to know about her or whatever, so they put her up for adoption or something like that. And someone else in the town adopted her and called her Laurie Strode. And she grew up thinking that person was the family, but then discovers who the family actually is and the connection to it. And I'm not sure I was a big fan about her being connected to Mike Myers when it was announced in the second one, because the first one is such an effective horror film that you don't need to have that extraneous story bit that says he was trying to kill his sister, his other sister. Instead, you could just make it the case that it just was wrong person, wrong time, wrong place sort of scenario. Went back to town. There were some young girls. Maybe it turned him on. And when he gets turned on, that's when he kills because his sister was having sex, even though he was, only 9 or 10 years old and probably doesn't understand about it. But maybe something inside him, snapped when he saw her, having sex and decided to kill her. And then maybe he realized that there's still lots of promiscuous women out there and wants to teach them a lesson, blah, blah, blah. Don't know. I don't care. Mike Myers alone is the granddaddy of slashers. Perfected the stalkery sort of walk, sort of the always hanging the. And he's not as blunt as a Freddy or a Jason, who just go right in and just kill. Mike Myers is more of a patient killer, playing with his food, whatever, stalking them and just sort of being there. So when you see the movie and you see him stalking these girls and you're screaming, "Look behind you, girl, he's right there." But every time a noise happens or whatever, and they check it out, he's gone like smoke. And it ends in one of the best ways is that, he gets shot by his doctor who's hunted him down. And then he falls from the top story of a house onto the ground. The doctor looks out, sees him, looks like that he's dead, relaxes a little bit, then talks to Jamie Lee Curtis, who survived, and then goes back and looks, and he's gone. And then you play the dun 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 dun, the Halloween theme, and the movie ends with the killer on the loose. And originally, John Carpenter's plan was, and Deborah Hill's plan was to do an anthology series that every Halloween movie they were going to make was going to have a different characters, different cast, a different storyline. But because of the popularity of Michael Myers and his first ever, for the most part, kind of slashery sort of way he is, they started making more Halloween movies. And they have Mike Myers' character is the only one that we've seen many multiverse versions of him. At least 4 multiverses exist in the Halloween world. I talked about this when I was doing the John Carpenter thing, or it was the 80 horror movies of Halloween. But real quick is that there's been a total of 9 original films, one of which doesn't quite fit with the others, and or actually 2. Let's just cover. So the original Halloween is the main point. Every multiverse comes from that. So the first multiverse, the main timeline, as it were, I can't say main because it's all different now, but the first timeline they had was you had the original Halloween and Halloween 2, Jamie Lee Curtis reprised her role as this Donald Pleasant, stuff like that. And then you jump to Halloween 4, 5, and 6, and they're following the story that happened in 1 and 2. Laurie ended up having a child, a little girl, and then she died in a car accident. So the little girl was put around much like her mother was through foster care, is now being raised by another family. And then Michael Myers comes, and this is all the connection that she's his sister and stuff like that. So you have that in 1 and 2, and then 4 and 5, he's trying to connect with his niece, and then 6 is just where the story goes absolutely bonkers. They had no idea what to do with him. Number 5 is basically just a straight up slasher film. He goes around and he just slashes and hacks and slashes and kills people. Number 6, we learned that there was actually a cult behind his, seemingly not being able to be killed and him killing on these specific times. And it is more gory than any of the other ones out there, and is also one of the more boring ones, despite a young Paul Rudd being in it. So that's the first timeline. And then they decided we need something special for the 20th anniversary. So 98, again, during this period where there was horror films were huge with young actors and stuff like that, they decided for the 20th anniversary they needed to get Jamie Lee Curtis back, and they needed to do a new Halloween movie with her. In that one, Halloween H2O, she has a son, not a daughter, and she faked her death, and she actually moved to another location where she's a headmistress at a boarding school. And she's consistently scared that Michael Myers is going to come. So you have Halloween 1, 2, and 7 is the second timeline. 7 and 8, I should say, is the second timeline. Because 7 is one of the best films. I talked about that already. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. But has a great ending where she squares off against Michael Myers. But because it made so much money, the suits are like, we need another one. But Jamie Lee Curtis didn't want to do another one. And she thought that they had put a period on the story by having her cut off his head. But then they came up with a entirely horrible reason why he's still alive. And then she ends up getting killed early on, and then the movie just devolves into a terrible, shitty film, and it ends there. It doesn't make any money and stuff like that. So then Rob Zombie decides he wants to remake the movie, so he remakes Halloween, basically a shot-for-shot remake, but makes some changes for more updating purposes and to make it more for his sort of perspective, the way he makes things, his flavor, as it were. And then Halloween 2, because Halloween 1 was successful, Halloween 2 comes out and he absolutely just upends everything you knew about Michael Myers and Halloween, and is a completely different and original sequel to his Halloween, which was basically, as I said, a lazy rewrite of the first one. So that's another timeline. But after that, number 2's box office stuff was disaster. So then they fast forward to the most recent trilogy that just ended, I think, last year with Halloween Kills. So you have Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. Those are the 3. And so that created its own trilogy. And I think within that aspect, the next timeline is formed. I think it's the original Halloween and then this trilogy, because now in this trilogy, she doesn't have a son. She has a daughter, again, played by Judy Greer. And she's a grandmother, and then she realizes that Michael Myers is coming back. I don't think they're related in this timeline. So you've got at least 3 or 4 different timelines going on. But Michael Myers himself is he's just a quiet guy who's very good at stalking. You can't hear him, and you only see him if you're lucky. And it's a pretty decent killer, does some artistic stuff, changes some things up in Michael Myers number 4. Number 3 is Freddy Krueger's Nightmare on Elm Street. It's such a great premise about a supposed pedophiliac janitor who gets burned alive in the school, but he curses the families that burned him in the school, and he's going to take out his revenge on their children. And he somehow is able to have the power of entering people's dreams, which is a really cool power, by the way. It's a really cool idea for like a film, like a demonic character that is able to enter children's dreams and possibly kill them in their dreams as well, to get a modicum of revenge against the people who killed him. Again, a whole bunch of sequels came out about it. You get the classic Freddy versus Jason. You've also got a couple of the reboots as well. And in general, it's a really, as I said, a good premise for a horror film, and he is considered a slasher because he jumps from one kid's dreams to another one and kills them and stalks them and kills them inside that dream, because he doesn't come out during the day. He just comes out in dream time and is able to cause pain to those who are dreaming all this, despite the fact they're not physically there. But the character, again, iconic. Robert Englund, iconic, played the role all the time. And except for the remake, I have to say that was someone else. But that's number 3. Number 2, we find Ghostface from the Scream movies. He is number 2, or they are number 2, I should say, because of Halloween might have been the grandfather of the slasher film, but this is the one that brought it back to life. Scream brought it back to life, a meta horror film about kids who grew up, watching these slasher films and other type of horror films, growing up, in high school and stuff like that. That's what you do. You watch those stuff and you become aware of the things, and you start, figuring out ways to survive horror film, stuff like that. So as Randy says, he's got the list of rules. If you follow these rules, you survive a horror movie, sort of thing. And but what makes Ghostface interesting is that it changes up the perspective, because you know who Leatherface is, you know who Freddy Krueger is, you know who Mike Myers is, you know who Jason Voorhees is. They're all killers, but that's who they are. The Scream Ghostface ones could be anybody. And it's your job, because you're being targeted, it's your job to figure out why this killer is targeting you and your friends, and who it is. And sometimes it can be your own friends doing it. Could be other relations with you, whatever. But that's what made them at number 2, was the fact that it made it more into a crime story instead of a horror film, because you had to figure out who the killer was, a homicide thing. You had to play homicide detective to try to figure out who killed the people and who amongst your friend group could potentially do it. And so each one of the Scream movies has had a unique character be the killer, and a character that you've been introduced to in the main film and has, sometimes could have a decent sized role when it comes to it, and then turns out to be the killer also, is sometimes quite a good twist. The simple costume, which anybody can get at like a Halloween store, which they actually do have, and I think I have one also, actually. I could dress up like Ghostface like that. Anybody can. You just get the mask, the cloak, and stuff like that, and you just go around and you start slicing and dicing. That's how you do it. But that is number 2 is Ghostface, because the way that they changed up the genre of horror films. And then after that, everybody had their killer have to have a secret identity until you got to like an Inviolate Nature and stuff like that, where you know who the killer is right off the bat because you're following them. And there's no way this killer could be part of your friend group, so on and so forth. So that's who number 2 is Ghostface. Finally, number 1 is Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th. I know it might seem like a surprise, but whenever you think about a slash killer, who is the first person that pops into your mind? Probably not Michael Myers, probably not Freddy Krueger, probably not Leatherface. It's Jason Voorhees, because that's what he does. He slashes, he slashes and dashes, he hacks and slashes. He pretty much stays for the most part, at a summer camp, and the campers that come to town there, they get intimate with each other and they get killed. Or he just goes around and just starts killing people, stalking them, killing them in unique ways. My favorite is still picking up the couple that's in the sleeping bag, picks them up and smashes them against the tree. That's awesome. When they did the 3D one, they had the arrow that he shot come at you from the screen to make it look like it's coming at you, but then it enters kid who he's killing. He's got a machete. He slices and dices his way through there. Can be gory in some aspects, can do sort of stuff like that. And he's also a character that could have become one note if you just kept him in the summer camps. Like, why do you keep going back to the camp knowing that he's there? But somehow they were always able to try to find a way to kill him. But because he's like the embodiment of evil or hate or whatever, he always survives. But at other times they tried to explain how he survived. Like the one is that they killed him off in like number 3 or number 4 or something like that. But because he was so popular, they had to bring him back. But they had to bring him back kind of believable way. So they came up with an idea. These 2 stupid kids during a rainstorm decided to pull a Frankenstein and for whatever reason decided to use Jason Voorhees' body in the coffin to be their test subject to bring back someone from the dead. And of course, it gets struck by lightning, and Jason Voorhees comes back to life and goes and hack slashes people. And then there's one where he goes to Manhattan. So instead of him hanging around a summer camp, he actually goes to the big city and kills people. Again, another decent idea about doing stuff and a different take on things. And then he goes to hell. So he finally dies again and then gets sucked to hell here, where he ends up facing off against Freddy Krueger, one of the best fight movies that there are out there. And then they send him to outer space into the future and have him slice and dice on board a spaceship. And then they do a really decent reboot of it with a very creepy, even more creepy, more so sort of 21st century theme than the one you're used to, and making him a lot more aggressive and making it a little more interesting because he's not passive so much as he does a lot of stuff in the films, but he's not as aggressive about it. In the reboot, he is. And again, it hits with the holiday sort of thing, Friday the 13th. You see the memes all the time, you see him, Friday the 13th, pictures of Jason all over the place. Or if the 13th is on a Thursday instead, and you see the sad Jason that Friday is not the 13th, so or it's the 14th or the 12th or whatever. So there is no Friday the 13th this month. But that's what makes him like the epitome of the slasher. He wasn't the first, and he really spun out of the popularity of Halloween and Prom Night. But I think Jason Voorhees, of everybody, and Friday the 13th is more iconic than a Mike Myers and Halloween, than a Freddy Krueger and Nightmare Before Elm Street, because, as I said, he is the epitome of what a slasher killer is in the movies, and everybody emulates him in the Violent Nature. Again, I got to go back to that. You could basically make that a Friday the 13th movie, just be from the perspective of Jason Voorhees, because he takes his time. He's methodical, except in the new reboot where they sort of make him a bit more aggressive, which is a good way of updating the character, and I wish they would have continued with that. He's got video games where you can play as Jason or as one of his victims, that sort of thing. And there's comic books and just the whole connection with Friday the 13th. There's more Friday the 13th in a year than there are Halloweens. There's one Halloween, there's one Valentine's Day, there's one St. Patrick's Day, there's one Christmas, there's one Thanksgiving, but there is multiple. In some cases, there's only one Friday the 13th, some there's none, but sometimes there's 3 Friday the 13th in a year. I think there's at least always one. I think every year, I think there's at least always one Friday the 13th. Don't quote me on it, but I think there is at least all the time. Let's see. We had one in September. We have one in December of this year. 2025, we have one in June, and that's it. 2026. We have one in February and in March back to back, because February and March are basically the same. 2027 is in August. 2028 is in October. 2029, April, July. And in the 2030, September. So you can get multiple ones. And again, so then it kind of repeats 2031, you have June again. So it kind of repeats due to how the months go. And again, sometimes you have one, sometimes you have two, sometimes you have three. Sometimes you have some back to back, and sometimes it does fall in October. But you have multiple Friday the 13th, so you can have multiple memes about Jason Voorhees, or you can do multiple stuff. And then they're not even done. They're doing a Crystal Lake TV show. It's going to be on streaming on Peacock or Paramount, one of those two, next year. So there, Ryan Murphy, who did American Horror Story, is doing it. So you got that as well. Jason Voorhees is the epitome of a slasher killer. Whenever you think of slasher films and slasher killers, I guarantee you the first person you always think of is Jason Voorhees and Friday the 13th. It's just a fact. That's why he's number one. Obviously, since I didn't have a lot of experience with these, this episode might have been a little less than I was hoping it would be, but at least I did it. I've done my 8th one. Tomorrow we got the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. I've got 2 shows tomorrow. My regular show, Dylan Knows, pops up at about 11 o'clock at night on Saturday. And sometime during the day tomorrow, I will do I think it's top spooky series. I think it's top 35 spooky series. So we'll talk about TV shows that have spooky aspects to it, like an X-Files or a Buffy or a Charmed, stuff like that. And even some of the streaming stuff and stuff like that. And then Sunday finds us with Halloween specials. Christmas has specials. Halloween has television specials as well. And we do cover that on Sunday. And then we get to the week of Halloween. So thanks for watching. I'm sorry it wasn't the best one in the world, but hopefully the list was helpful. Thanks and have a great day.